Good morning and good evening, everyone, wherever you are. So this is basically talking about analysis of supply demand balance of lithium company in China. So I've had, wait 1 second. Sorry, we just need some other minor adjustments. Yeah, we're trying to give out the full presentation of this PowerPoint. 1 sec. Okay, sorry about that. So I've had this presentation last month for the International Lithium Association when the lithium prices in China keep falling. And then lucky for you all, so this month a lot of dynamic happening in the Chinese lithium market. And yeah, we have updated many data about this upcoming months, especially in April. So yeah, so briefly, let me see. Okay. Yeah, so first is basically a brief review about the lithium carbonate market. So yeah, so I think many of you have seen this diagram before. So basically, you see the first period, kind of falling period, very blind before the 2020, and then the second period is uprising period. So since really the second half of the 2022, the shortage of the lithium resources has persisted and reached its peak in October. Some period around here. So despite the disruption of cost caused by the pandemic, the increased capacity has only led to a slight growth in the supply in October and November, while the demand remains still pretty high. So at the same time, the short-term fluctuations in the logistic transportation have caused import volumes to be very low in October, leading to the peak of the shortage. So after November, as demand gradually falls, supply still remain a slight really growth at that time, and import values may concentrate in port due to the delays, so effectively feeding the supply and demand gap. But in December, the supply demand structure reversed due to the weakening of EV market demand. So basically, yeah, here's a reason for the falling price. Basically, the price cut of fuel vehicles and the end user demand really decreased for EV. So yeah, and the second part is really about the lithium carbonate supply demand balance in China, and we just go straight into the topic. So here is basically the supply demand curve from the last year January to the last month, currently in April. So basically, we can see the demand the balance is like riding a roller coaster, where at this period, which is last year and October, where the demand is extremely high, and when the price of lithium carbonate is around 600k RMB at this point. But the turning point comes to the December, as we just talked about, when the subsidies for the electric vehicles were drawn, and the demand suddenly drops very low at that point, and the fuel-based cars price dropped, so the EV just basically got shut down, the demand. So here in January, the demand was extremely high, and that follows through the February and the March. You can see the February here, there's a little bit better because it's in Chinese New Year, and the supply of the lithium carbonate was extremely low at that point. Yeah. So basically, it's a plain graph about how the demand supply curve at that point. You can see this supply and demand was reversed periodically based on the each quarter of the year. So basically, on the first quarter of the year, the demand for the EVs are always like lower, and on the end, demand was always higher. So basically, we can just focus on the current situations. You can see from the February and March, the huge gap of the demand and supplies. The demand, the supply drop. You see, basically the difference didn't because of the demand is getting better, but it's basically because you can see the huge gap of the supplies. There's a large amount of supply deficit here, and the demand really didn't go grows very well over here. And you see the total balance, you can say it didn't get really well or really bad in April, but basically very plain. So next is monthly lithium carbonate production in China from still the last year to this year for comparison. You see overall, the overall trend in this year is decreasing. But I want you guys to all focus on the second, like the February of each year. You see, for February, the production of lithium carbonate is always like lower in each February because that's the Chinese New Year. So everyone is staying home for the holiday and no one. So the overall production is much lower. But usually for the end of March, the production will be goes right back up. Yeah, you can see for the last year. But this year, the situation just turned over. In March, the production is still very, very low because of the high inventory of lithium carbonate smelters. Yeah, and the low demand. And even is the trend continued to April. One is because of the low demand, still low demand, and the second part is because of the lack of raw materials. So I don't know if you know about the Jiangxi environmental inspection. The production of the lepidolite is very, very low. So that basically half, I don't really say half, but still a large amount of production in Jiangxi using lepidolite. Yeah, the April you can see still very low. And then is the demand of the main downstream of the lithium carbonate, which is the NCMs and the LFPs, which are the materials made to make the batteries. You see, last year they're at the peak demand, but just turning into this year's demand fall dramatically. Yeah, it's first because of the LFPs and the NCMs. The operation rate of the battery manufacturers were extremely low at this starting of the year, especially like couple of the main battery makers like the CATL and BYDs, they will only have 30 to 40 operation rate at this time. And that's why the orders from the NCM and LFP manufacturers were extremely low also. Yeah, but now gradually they are kind of recovering. I don't say they recover a lot, but from April to May, it is like a slight better because the overall demand in March is extremely low in the first quarter of the year. So it appears it just makes April the demand looks like better, but still pretty bland. So next I want to talk about the basic inventory shift for the distribution in China. So you can see last year most inventories of lithium carbonate is holding by the downstream material manufacturers. But just going into the beginning of this year, there's still again a diverse situation happened. So the lithium carbonate smelters kind of stocked their inventories into their, and the downstream low demand just shift out inventory. So they're just not buying as much as expected. So you can see overall the inventory was stacked higher and higher each month of this year. But yeah, you see, but gradually the April is kind of another slight turning point where the inventories from the downstream was very, very low. They're too low to handle their current orders. So they are kind of slightly trying to refill the inventory. You can see here from March to April, just a slight increase. So, and I know you guys are very, very interested about the current Chinese market. Why? So what the hell is going on with the current Chinese market lithium carbonate prices? It seems to raise crazily from the end of April to May, and now it just seems doesn't move anymore, or just maybe slight going up and going down. I will just explain that question at the end of the presentation. So yes, this is just a general idea to want you guys know about how the inventory is shifting. So yeah. So here is our estimation of the downstream demand. So here is the left part is the estimation demand for the battery grade lithium carbonate, and the override is the technical grade of lithium carbonate. So for here, as from our current latest news about the demand. So over the Labor Day in the first week of the May, the demand for the EV was the sales for EV was kind of higher than before, like much higher than April. But now after the first week of the May, going to the second and third, the sale went down really obvious, especially this week. So that's mainly one reason is kind of because of the main EV manufacturers like Tesla's, they're about to publish their new models into the early of the June. So most of the customers, they're just still waiting to see what's the difference. So they're just holding a kind of hold and see kind of sentimental right now. And yeah, and the second reason is kind of because in June 18th, there's like a kind of shopping holiday for these energy storage for the electronics, kind of like the Black Friday for electronics devices. So many of the downstream energy storage battery cells, they have raised their orders. So you can see there's a slight really difference, like slight demand from the LFPs majorly. Yeah, but then in June and July, it kind of go into blend again. So our final estimation of when the time for EV really goes up is always the last quarter of the year, maybe from September to October. You can see there's a much higher gap here, and that's the real peak for demand. So for now, the demand, we think it is still a little bit too early to talk about the price rising. Yeah. And you can see here, they're basically same. The demand for LFP rose the most. Yeah, and yeah. And yeah, so here is about the cost of lithium carbonate productions. Basically, is their overall cost. So here with the lowest cost is the Salt Lake in South America, and they have extremely low raw material cost. You can barely see with your eyes, and their overall cost is much less, like 30,000 RMB according to our estimation. And the second place is the Salt Lake in China. Basically, it's a little bit higher than the Salt Lake in South America, but not too much. Basically, the cost difference in the processing cost. The raw material cost is about the same. And the third place is the self-produced spodumene manufacturers, which have their own supply of spodumene, and they do not import from the other countries like Australia. So but that only stands for a very small portion of overall lithium carbonate production in China, maybe just 10,000 tons of LCE based on our estimation. And on the fourth place is the self-produced lepidolite, which is mainly based in Jiangxi, and their overall cost is like a little bit higher, but not too much. But then we have outsourced lepidolite and outsourced spodumene, where you have to buy your raw materials from like other sources. You have to buy your raw material from other commercial traders or other mining industries for a real high price. You can see the difference between the material cost from down there to here, and especially for the spodumene. Most of spodumene raw materials come from like imports from Australia, Brazil, where their import prices are still very high compared to the lepidolite. You see, so our overall estimation for their cost is around 250k RMB. But so for the price today, they are really not. They're kind of still making a little bit profit. Yeah. So overall, the conclusion of this diagram over here. So integrated companies have like absolute cost efficiency. You can see the overall difference. And the next slide is basically our estimation of 2026 cost of lithium carbonate productions. Because of all the amount of raw material release, maybe all from Australia, maybe all the European materials from the other South American countries. So the surplus of the raw material will drive down the price for the overall cost of lithium carbonate. So this is just our overall estimation. Yeah, for like 3 years later. So the cost of the raw materials imported from other countries will not have that much of difference in price compared to our self-produced spodumene and lepidolite in China in the upcoming future. So basically, at last, I will try to answer about probably the questions that most of you are curious about. What happened to the Chinese lithium market in May and April? You can see the April, the price of the lithium carbonate was pretty low, around 170k RMB, and then at the end of April, it rose super fast, like riding a rocket. So the So the main reason we have all written over about here. So let's start with the purchase by essential needs from the downstream material manufacturers because of their low inventory levels. So at first they're just trying to buy lithium carbonate just as they need it. They are maybe just not they are not trying to get a lot. They're just trying to buy enough to deal with their current orders. But then the commercial traders have the sense of the opportunities. So they have created publicity stunt, like they have pushed the price like higher, or maybe around 200K. Maybe they are selling with each others and make the market really active and feel like the current downstream demand has getting better and better. And they have pushed price about to 230K, like at the end of the April. And then the Salt Lake auction, I don't know if you guys heard about that. That auction really brought up the hype and it creates a false impression of peak downstream demand. So that auction brought up the technical grade lithium carbonate to 250,000 RMB. Yes, which is much higher than the current spot markets of that day. I remember that day the technical grade lithium carbonate was still around 210. Okay, so yeah, that auction really brought up the hype. So then the downstream material manufacturers, they are basically forced to buy more of the lithium carbonate to prevent they run out or prevent when the price goes too high and they're experiencing more loss. Yeah, so they have to purchase more to fill the inventory before the price of LC goes even higher. And in the meantime, a lot of the lithium carbonate smelters, they have like cooperated with the commercial traders. They like making a deal, like they are not selling much. Maybe they're holding the prices and they are not giving a lot of supplies to the downstream, and they just want to push the price higher, and which they succeed at the beginning of May. You can see this point is where they cooperate together. Yeah, and then the price of rising. So when it comes here, you can see a flat end at the end of May and until now. That is because the rising price of lithium carbonate didn't bring up the price of the NCM, the LFPs, and the battery cells. So basically, most of the material manufacturers, they're experiencing losses where the price may be exceeding 300K. So they have made a deal, with each other that they are not really accepting price over 300K. That is why the overall price started to, I won't say declining, but yes, holding very plain at this point. Yeah, they're just refused buying this over 30K. But some of the material manufacturers, they are really short on the inventory, and they have to buy at higher prices, like over 300K. Yeah, that's why the price is still maybe going up a little bit, but not too high. So the rising trend of price for LC eventually slowed down. Yeah, I just told about. And the commercial traders right now, they are starting to short selling. So they are now giving us a lot of information about how the prices are really lower than we expected. Maybe they told us that they have been selling the lithium carbonate like 290K or something like that. They're trying to lower the prices because they are short selling. But most of the major smelters in China, in like Tianqi Lithium and Ganfeng Lithium, they're still holding the price very high, around 320K about this place. So the price for today or for the current week is really diverse. Some people think the price will still go up, and some people think the price is go down, which this scenario have never happened this year before. So about where the price will go in, we really do not know, but we still have to look at the demand about in June to see how things goes. Yeah, and basically that concludes about today's topic about Chinese demand and supply balance. So I don't know how to show. I think right now we can invite some of you to ask questions, but I don't know how this works because it is really our first time using this app. So yeah, I don't know if you can raise your hand or whatsoever. Or you can text some in the chat box if there are any, if there's a chat box. How much spodumene is required to extract? About 7.4 to 8. Yeah, based on our data. 7.4 to 8 tons of spodumene concentrate. Around 6%, yeah, around 6% grade. Okay, that's a question from Karen. I don't know if you guys have another question. You can text in, you can just, yeah, write in the chat box. All right. Sorry, yeah. What is the production cost of Jiangxi plant producer in terms of RMB terms? So basically, there's two scenarios. The two kind of smelters. One smelters have their own like production of the lepidolite, where they have their own mines and they do not have to buy their lepidolite from other sources. So our estimation for the integrated smelters is like around 80 to 1,000 K. Yes, but if you do not have your own integrated like a mining, you have to buy the lepidolite from other sources. Our estimation is around 180 to 200 K. Yeah, that's our estimation. So let me see if how do I jump to the next question. Sorry. Okay, are there more Jiangxi lepidolite supply that expect to come online in 2033? That is a very good question. So for now, the overall supply of lepidolite is very short in Jiangxi because of the inspections, and most of the mines are shut down because they are not fully qualified. So in Jiangxi, I want to say, but yeah. Basically, I think the situation will getting better to the end of the Jiangxi, to end of the 2023, because according to the overall financial report of the first quarter, Jiangxi was the province with the least GDP increase in China for the first quarter. So I think the government in Jiangxi will eventually gradually release the overall lepidolite, lepidolite production, because for the Jiangxi, especially for Yichuan, the lepidolite production is basically their main income, their main economic income. Well, I don't know how to see. I'm trying to figure out how to see the hand raising. Sorry, we're still trying to figure out. Yeah, we just go through the text box, I guess. If there can see if there it goes. Okay, wait, answer. It's the same situation with lithium hydroxide. I would say, yeah, basically the price of lithium hydroxide is currently lower than the lithium carbonate in China right now, and it is just remain the same trend. And I would say, yeah, so our price for lithium carbonate today raises like 3,000 RMB today, and the lithium hydroxide price also raised. So I would say it's kind of same situation right now, because most of China's price making were all looking at lithium carbonate. So the lithium hydroxide is kind of just following right now, because the demand for lithium hydroxide is quite lower than the lithium carbonate. Who was a vendor in the solid LC auction at 200? Do you mean the seller? One second. Yeah, the seller was Lanke. I don't know if you know about this. Yes. That was the first auction, and there were actually another auction yesterday. I don't know if that was for Lanke, but the price rising was ended. No, like barely no one bid it for the lithium carbonate auction yesterday. So let's see. So can you talk about the import volumes and how the changes to the USD value in Chinese downstream? So I don't think the US demand will like greatly impacted the Chinese downstream because the IRAs and whatsoever. So import volumes of these carbon monoxide were basically really playing. I remember last month in March, the overall import volume of the lithium carbonate was quite a decreased compared to February, and this month, like May, the April was again decreased. So I would say the overall import was not quite optimistic. Yeah, the U.S. demand, well, I don't think, because the Chinese market, we're all really looking at the Chinese demand. So, and because of IRAs and the situation, the free trading agreement. So I don't think the U.S. demand will really have a great influence about the Chinese downstreams. So yeah, I think that's really about time for the questions. So basically, if you have more questions, you can just email our co-workers from this overseas sales team. And yeah, I think we can just answer more of your questions through emails and through like words contacts. And thank you.